There is a specific type of financial audit that I have conducted with people in their 50s and 60s that almost always produces the same reaction, a combination of recognition and discomfort that I have come to think of as the most productive emotional state in financial planning. The audit is not about their investments. It is not about their retirement timeline. It is about their spending, but specifically the spending that does not feel like spending in the way that large purchases feel like spending. I am not talking about the vacation that cost $12,000 or the car that stretched the budget. I am talking about the category of expenditure that accumulates below the threshold of conscious attention, the subscriptions, the convenience spending, the small, recurring costs that are individually unremarkable and collectively substantial, and the habit-based patterns that have been present long enough that they are no longer perceived as choices. They are perceived as simply the way life works. And the reason this audit produces recognition and discomfort in equal measure is that almost everyone, when they see the numbers clearly for the first time, realizes simultaneously that they knew these patterns existed and that they did not know how much they cost. My name is William Grant, and I want to spend this conversation on the specific category of spending that does the most financial damage after 50, not because the amounts are dramatic in any individual instance, but because they are compounded in a specific way that makes their real cost fundamentally different from their apparent cost. The apparent cost of a subscription is its monthly fee. The real cost of a subscription that will not be canceled before retirement is its monthly fee multiplied by the remaining months of working life, subtracted from investment growth that the same amount would have produced had it been deployed differently. That calculation, applied to the full range of habit-based spending that most people over 50 carry without examining, produces a number that is routinely surprising even to people who believe they have thought carefully about their finances. The first category of harmless-looking spending that costs a fortune is the subscription layer. This is a phenomenon that did not exist in its current form a generation ago, and that has accumulated around most people in their 50s through a process of gradual adoption that mirrors the process by which any habit forms, one reasonable decision at a time, each justified at the moment it was made, the aggregate never reviewed as a system. The streaming services that were individually inexpensive and collectively total to something significant. The software subscriptions that were free trials and became monthly charges. The membership fees for organizations that were valuable when joined and that have persisted through annual renewals that required no active decision to continue. The premium tiers of services that were upgraded during a period of convenience and that default to renewal without the friction of a new choice. The health and wellness subscriptions that were started with genuine intention and that continue through the inertia of the automatic payment. None of these is individually irrational. The system they form together is something that almost no one has examined as a system. I worked with someone named Theodore, 59 years old, a regional sales director with a comfortable income and a financial situation that he described as solid without being exceptional. When we conducted what I call a subscription inventory, a documented list of every recurring charge hitting his accounts over the previous 3 months, the total number of active subscriptions was 23. He had known about 14 of them. The remaining 9 he had either forgotten about or had not realized were still active after a trial period had ended. The monthly total was not catastrophic in isolation. Annualized and projected forward to his retirement date at 67, then compounded at his portfolio's historical return rate, the capital represented by those 8 years of subscription spending was a number that made him quiet for a longer time than most financial conversations produce. The second category is the convenience premium. the consistent, habitual choice of the more expensive option, specifically because it requires less friction, less time, or less cognitive effort, in conditions where the time saved is not genuinely scarce and the cognitive effort saved is not genuinely burdensome. This is the delivery fee on food that would have cost significantly less prepared at home, accepted as a standard rather than an occasional convenience. This is the premium grocery tier, maintained as a default rather than a considered choice. This is the neighborhood parking garage used every time, rather than the street parking that would require 4 additional minutes of walking. Individually, these are not financial decisions at all. They are too small and too routine to register as decisions. Collectively, across a month, they form a convenience budget that most people have never identified as a category of their spending, but that represents a meaningful percentage of their discretionary income. The third category is what I call legacy spending, the expenditure that made sense at an earlier life stage and that has persisted not because the conditions that justified it persist, but because cancellation or modification requires a deliberate act that the passage of time has made feel unnecessary. The insurance coverage levels calibrated to a household with dependent children and a mortgage that is now substantially paid. The club or organization memberships, whose value, in the years they were actively used, has not transferred to the years they are maintained by inertia. The premium level of a product or service that was appropriate when it was chosen and that has never been questioned since. The legacy spending category is particularly relevant after 50 because the life stage changes that make these expenditures excessive, children leaving home, careers stabilizing, mortgages advancing, social priorities shifting, are precisely what happens in the decade before and during the 50s, and the financial structure adjusts more slowly than the life circumstances that originally justified it. The fourth category, the one that produces the most discomfort when named directly, is the emotional spending that serves a function that the person understands is not primarily financial, but has not separated from the financial analysis. This is the spending that fills an emotional need, for comfort, for status, for the sense of rewarding oneself for effort expended, for the maintenance of an identity that the spending supports. The luxury tier that is maintained not because the quality difference is genuinely material to the person's daily experience, but because the label carries an identity function that is difficult to separate from the object itself. I name this category not to suggest it should be eliminated. It should not necessarily be, but because it cannot be evaluated honestly without naming what it is doing. And most people have not named it because naming it would require examining whether the emotional function it serves is worth the financial cost it carries over the decade before retirement. I have spent years working through this kind of spending analysis with people who had been making good financial decisions for decades and who had one remaining category of financial life that they had never examined with the same rigor they applied to their investments. And I reached a point where I wanted to offer something more than just the analysis, something that addressed the other side of the equation directly. Because what I observed is that the people who most successfully reduced the spending that was costing them a fortune without feeling it were not primarily the people who disciplined themselves to spend less. They were the people who built an additional income layer that changed the psychological relationship between every dollar spent and the retirement they were building toward. When your retirement does not depend exclusively on reducing expenditure, the decisions about what to keep and what to change become genuinely chosen rather than forced. I put together a resource about exactly how people in their 50s have built that kind of income. And I made it available because watching people audit their spending without addressing the income side of the same problem felt incomplete. The link is in the pinned comment below. The reason I want you to look at it now rather than later is specific. The spending habits that are costing you the most are the ones you have already normalized, which means every month they continue costs more than a month from now would suggest. The resource I put together addresses the income side of that same reality. It is available right now in the pinned comment. The practical step that the spending analysis produces, when it is done honestly with real numbers from real accounts rather than estimates from memory, is not a list of things to give up. It is a recategorization. Some spending that felt like a small, ongoing cost reveals itself as a large capital commitment over the remaining accumulation years. Some spending that felt like a necessary life expense reveals itself as a legacy of circumstances that no longer apply. And some spending that felt like a choice reveals itself as a habit, which is the most important distinction, because habits are not choices and cannot be evaluated the way choices are evaluated until they are first recognized as habits rather than as simply the way life is. I want to share a few people whose spending audits changed the direction of their financial planning in ways that the investment conversations had not. Nathaniel from Seattle, Washington, told me that the subscription inventory he conducted after a conversation similar to this one revealed that he was spending more on recurring digital services annually than he contributed to his IRA in the same year, and that he had been aware of neither number with precision. Dorothy. That name is blocked. Her name was Vivian from Salt Lake City, Utah, who discovered that her legacy insurance structure, maintained since her youngest child was born, never reviewed after the youngest child turned 32, was costing her 3 times what appropriate coverage for her current life stage would cost. And Spencer from Richmond, Virginia, who described the exercise of categorizing his spending by whether each item was a genuinely current choice or a historical habit that had never been rechosen, as the most financially clarifying hour he had spent in the previous decade. The link in the pinned comment is there right now, and it addresses the income side of what the spending analysis reveals. Looking at where money leaves is half of the picture. Having something that builds the other side, independently, without requiring you to spend less to save more, is the other half. Both halves matter. The pinned comment has the link to the half that most spending conversations leave out entirely.